Hi, my name is Larry Mortland. I retired as a lieutenant colonel from the Army. However, I initially enlisted in 1966 in the Navy, particularly in the Navy Seabees, combat construction engineers. I thought I was bypassing the Marine Corps duty that I basically signed up for, the platoon leaders course, while attending the University of Miami. However, signing up for the Seabees didn't save me very much, because right after basic training, we went to Little Creek, Virginia for SEER school, and then to Camp Geiger at Camp Lejeune, and I was assigned to the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force in Vietnam. Landed there in late August of 1966. 13 months with the 3rd MAF. I might as well just stayed right with the Marine Corps deal and stayed with it. I really enjoyed the outfit. The Seabees are a no-nonsense type of group, and they don't do a lot of paperwork. They just can do, and I really enjoyed it. Made some great friends there. Some I still hear from. The next rotation for me would have been back to Vietnam. Before I left, I had orders to go back, and I had the opportunity to basically disengage at that time. So I did, and I went right back in the Air Force. I had been in for 2 years. I made E5 in about 10 months, and I went in the Air Force as an E5. At that time, they had permanent and temporary E5s. Little did I know when they said you're going to be a permanent E5, I didn't know what they were, I was an E5 for 4 years without a chance of making E6. Came out of the Air Force, had some great assignments there. I worked in aviation, in the inertial guidance systems. I initially went to school at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and that was 46 weeks, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 1,200 and some hours of schooling. But we did the inertial guidance and bomb nav systems on B-52s, KC-130 tanker navigation, F-4 Phantom navigation bomb drop, C-130 package drop and navigate. Worked on a lot of different aircraft. Primarily went right from the school to SAC, Strategic Air Command, its own little Air Force. And in 1968 time frame, we were putting a lot of ordnance on the ground from many places. Did a lot of travel, Thailand, in particularly Phu Thao, Thailand, which was right on the coast of Thailand. It's a resort area now. Nothing there at the time, but it was just a great site to be at. Flew a lot of missions with the B-52s and the tankers. I also went to a factory school at General Dynamics and worked on the FB-111A, the swing wing model, and had some, as a young E5, went all over the world with those aircraft. There was 2 aircraft that I was assigned to, and I did all the electronics for those aircraft. We recovered all of the data electronically. This is 71, 72 time frame. Had some pretty sophisticated systems, and they captured every bit of data. And I worked with a team. It was what they called Category 3 testing for the Air Force. And you're not in a squadron, you're in the Air Force. So it was an Air Force-wide assignment. I traveled all over, went out to Nellis Air Force Base to the bombing range with them, and of course we had to remain overnight, RON, at Nellis, which is right next to Las Vegas, and it was tough. Had a lot of exciting times with them. We lost 1 aircraft, went on search and rescue flight with it. The aircraft that I was on became embroiled in a fire, and I was the avionics guy, and even though I was flying the search and rescue slot, they asked me to come forward, and there's nothing I could do. I said we had pulled circuit breakers and dumped fire extinguishers, and C-130 aircraft, the nose, the repeater scope for the pilot and co-pilot up front was on fire, and the whole nose of the airplane was burning backwards. And the pilot said, "All right, anybody wants to jump, I'll let down to 1,800 and we'll opened the back door, and I said, "Now," I said, "C-130 is a great bird. Take it to the ground." Rode it down, and he put her in. We opened the side door and cut the engines, and we just kind of bailed out. And that was my second aircraft go down. Went down in Vietnam with a helicopter one time. Yeah, but you know, you're in your 20s, you know, you're bulletproof. You know, these, you know, good stories for later. I came out of the Air Force in '72. I was in the reserves, but didn't opt to take the reserve positions at the time. I went into inactive reserve. I went and lived in the Bahamas for a couple of years to kind of cool my jets. Worked in electronics there. Basically worked for the Navy. I was under a contract to work at the Undersea Test and Evaluation Center, where they bring in Andros Island down there has an underwater test range where they bring in the submarines and do all their acoustics, sonars, and radars and everything. Plus they run test war games where they have helicopters and aircraft flying, surface vessels, and the submerged vessels. And we basically tracked everything, X, Y, Z coordinates, up, down, left, and right, within about 3 feet in real time. And we could feed it back to the vessels and show them where and what they were doing. It was very exciting. Biggest thing when I first got there, Cousteau was there filming Blue Holes of Andros, so we got to dive with them. I went there primarily just to dive because I do a lot of diving, and at that time that was a pretty well unknown place, third largest reef in the world, and just totally remote place. It was great. And I came back, went to college, started back in '74, and then joined ROTC. I already had 6 years active duty, and I said, what the heck, I can pick up another $100 a month going to school along with GI Bill, and I got my commission in 1978 with the Army, and I originally trained as a quartermaster, but I cross-trained to an MP where I was in an MP unit. I was with that unit for 8 years. 3 of the years I was on active duty as the what they call AGR, Active Guard Reserve. I was a first lieutenant at the time, and served with that MP unit as the full-time everyday person, contract monitoring, everything that a normal unit would have at a full-time active duty base. And it was myself and one NCO, and we ran everything on a daily basis. Specialty type unit. It was we were all trained as MP. However, this was a enemy prisoner of war escort guard company. You go with the capturing units right to the front lines, pick up enemy prisoner of war, and get them to the rear. All the segregation, separation, all that. We worked with MP PW camp, prisoner of war camp, which is our upper chain, and they actually went to Desert Storm, and they're the one that processed, and we did all those 100,000 plus Iraqi prisoners. Everything that we had trained on from the late 70s through the 80s went off without a hitch. Everything was smooth. Active duty folks have no MP prisoner of war assets. They're only a wartime asset. And they were quite surprised and quite pleased with the level of service that they received from that reserve unit. And that was great. I then went back to Florida Tech, where I graduated from in Melbourne, as a captain with Army ROTC. I graduated from there as a distinguished military student, distinguished military grad. At that time I was president of the Alumni Association at Florida Tech, and had just gone through the Presidential Search Committee. A new president was installed, and the colonel that I was working for, he said, take my desk. You know, he said, what better deal could I get? A guy that came out of this program a few years ago, knows everybody on this campus, can open any door. And we had a lot of neat things happen. We did a lot of neat programs. I went to the deans. The Army teaches you as a young officer, as a junior officer, you do a lot of staff briefings where you make a decision point for a senior officer. You gather all the information. You basically steer him to what you think is the best solution. You give him all the information. They make the decision. Yes, no, maybe, reject, you know, modify, whatever. And I did that with all the deans. And what the program I said was, let's give the ROTC scholarship winners, let's give them free room and board at the university. There's 1,200 schools or thereabouts where they can use a scholarship. There's about 300 major universities where they use them. They gave about 1,200 a year. So if you divide that up, every school would normally have about 6 or 8, 10, maybe 4-year scholarship winners. 4-year scholarships, a full ride. Now in Florida Tech, we have a lot of aviation, we have a lot of space engineering, 5-year degree programs, and very costly. So if somebody's got a free ride, why not bring it there? The only thing they didn't get was the room and board. So I decision briefed the deans. If we give them the free room and board, and I've already checked, it's contract meals, it's a contract service, so it's almost nothing to you. And there's always empty rooms in the dorms every year. And I said, so there's gravy. They went with it, and that year I brought in 31 4-year scholarship winners that about had a heart attack. But they provided all sorts of stuff for us after that. The university was extremely cooperative, and we were way above our quotas for everything. We built training places, large training places, such as the Army bases will have leadership reaction courses. Small group is put into a situation, someone's chosen as the leader, they come up with a solution to the problem and how to get people to work to do this, to solve it, and work together. You normally will take the lowest ranking person, put them in charge, because it's a follower-leader training program. I talked the school into purchasing the materials. I got the blueprints from the Army. I had a reserve unit, an engineering company, a friend of mine, bring his company over on the weekends, and they built it on school property. And then I went back to the school. I said, now you can lease these out to corporations for team training for your big corporate, Harris Corporation, Collins. And they were like, great, we like it. So, you know, win-win. And that's been, yeah, it's been my thing with the military. It's all the way through, I've always had the opportunity to be involved with those type of things. I came from the active duty. I went back in reserve status, and I spent about 6 or 7 years as a military academy liaison officer, basically a recruiter for West Point. I've served on congressional committees to make sure that the kids get to the schools they want to get to. I've had duty at West Point, both as the instructor group with the MALO, what they call Military Academy Liaison Officer, my MP unit as well. I have been there. We did all the security for receiving day. They call it our day. That's when all new cadets arrive. All 990 some of them all arrive. And you can't imagine what a day that is going to be. And believe it or not, of those approximately 1,000 kids, approximately 50 to 60 will decline that day. They cannot take the initial grind. They didn't know what they were getting into. They will walk that day, and we have to escort them out. I mean, they're sitting there with their surfboard on the curb, you know. I don't think this is what I wanted, okay? Yeah. So, okay, bus will be by in a minute. Have a nice life. Enjoy yourself. And it's amazing to me because 4 years at West Point is probably about $500,000 with all the training, equipment, everything that they go through, plus the education. Show me somebody that graduates from West Point that doesn't get a job as soon as they get out. Okay, so I just found it always strange that those people would, they would go away so quick. From West Point assignment, I went back to ROTC. I joined the 108th Division, which is a individual training division out of North Carolina, headquartered in Charlotte. And they run all through the southeast, all the way to Puerto Rico. They do all the individual training, like basic training at, losing my thoughts here, the base in South Carolina, and I'll think of it in a minute, right outside Columbia, South Carolina. Big training base, and I'll remember in a minute. Anyway, they run the rifle ranges, they run the drill sergeant schools, they run all of that. And they started in '97, they put out a program. They had 3 schools colleges that they looked at, they would bring reserve officers as assistants for the active duty people at 3 universities. It was a trial program. They used the University of Central Florida, they used Georgia Tech, and the University of South Carolina. And of those 3 test pilot programs, the University of Central Florida took off like a rocket. Georgia Tech was about neutral, and South Carolina folded it up. And it all had to do with the person that's in charge of the reserve people. You had about 8 or 10 reserve officers that have to be extremely dedicated people, because you're going to be there during the week. You have to have the job situation where you can leave your work and be there. Also be away on weekends when they go out and do the training, the field training. You have to be there when the classes are in session during the week, whether it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 4 in the afternoon, whatever. Teach the classes, do your assignment, do your homework, do your grading papers, do all that, counsel all your cadets. You have to be available to do all of that, as well as be available to put on your fatigues, go to the field, and do training out there as well. I was fortunate that I got in with a really good group of guys. I was later able to recruit some top-notch sergeants that worked with us, and we were extremely successful. We became the model for the division that expanded to 12 more universities 2 years later. They are now, I have had the opportunity to address at conferences all of the professors of military science, as well as the division commanders for the other divisions, to speak to our program and do a PowerPoint presentation. And that now is the model, and it has been used at over 100 universities now online, with reserve officers at the college assisting, augmenting the active duty individuals. I just retired in October of 2005. I had, between active duty, reserve, and inactive reserve, 39 years of service, and I don't begrudge a minute. I am of a school, born right at the end of World War II. A lot of guys that served with myself and others in Vietnam, we're kind of the sons of Iwo Jima, if you will. We were born in the shadow of that mountain. There's an extremely well done book right now, Flags of Our Fathers, and I would recommend folks just read it. It speaks to the individual sacrifice, not just to the soldiers and sailors, but the people of the United States. And they're right at that crux right now, where they need to know that there were a lot of people, not just the soldiers, sailors, Marines, and Air Corps people, but the civilians. We had merchant marine people, we had people working in factories, we had truck drivers, we had all kind of people. And they sacrificed. They really did. They'd already, some of them were born and lived through World War I, they made it through the Depression, and now here they are wrapped up in a world war. Life was not a certain deal for anybody. And too many people today are not aware of that. They have no idea what a little bit of sacrifice, what a little bit of just self putting it out there is good for them. Again, I wouldn't begrudge a minute of those 39 years. VA's got me rated at 100% disability, and when I did my retirement program, I had a chance to speak. I turned part of my retirement back as scholarship money to the university, so that other people can pull through that can't make it dollar-wise or whatever. And I don't begrudge a nickel of that, because I know well-trained people are coming behind me. I need to sleep good at night knowing that we have got some of the best trained, and not just militarily trained, but ethically trained, all possibilities. These are good people that are going to be in charge of the sons and daughters of the people who join the Army. I have officers that I hear from all the time. I've personally commissioned, recruited, trained, and commissioned over 100 lieutenants in my 2 military career parts there, ROTC and West Point. I hear from them all the time. I just got a phone call that one of my NCOs was wounded in Iraq. He was shot through both legs by a sniper. The captain and the lieutenant were two of my former cadets, and they were right there with him. They were with the 1st Cav, and they couldn't get a sniper out of the area, so they just leveled the entire building. And that's what I trained them. I said, it's an insurgent war. They're not going to give up. Take it to them. And I get a phone call, and they said, worked. I said, yes, it will. I would like to see that more people learn that your little bit of service, I don't care if it's 2 years or 4 years or whatever, that's probably the best thing that John Kennedy ever did, to ask people, what can I do for my country? How much have we given back, is what I ask people. What have you given back? You take all these things for granted. You take all these things, you're born into this cloud of entitlement, you know, but what are you going to give back? What are you going to give back to your country? And that's, you know, part of what I teach as well when I do teach. I'd like to see the young people learn that. A lot of them are, but too many of them. We got about 2 generations worth of folks that have not picked up on that yet. Unfortunately, they may be the ones that have to sacrifice the most. They don't understand what it's all about. Therefore, very difficult pill, very bitter for them to have to swallow eventually. And that's about it. I'm working right now with the state of Florida for Fish and Wildlife. I worked with them as a reserve volunteer when I was on reserve and active duty with the MP unit back in the 80s. I discovered they had a reserve program, and because I was an MP officer and I grew up in Osceola County, Florida, wow. So take my gun and badge and head for the woods of East Osceola County. Did that for numerous years, moved back over here to Kissimmee from the coast, and started working with the Fisheries Division. And had over 20 years as a reserve volunteer with Game and Fish. Several years ago, one of the project leaders asked me, said, I really need somebody, would you consider coming out and letting me just pay you for what you've been volunteering for the last 20 years? And I said, yep. So I'm 4 years into that, and I'll probably, that's a good retirement job. Get out on the lakes, get onto the fishing, and again, I'm still serving people. We do basic guide service, if you will, because people are going to stop you all the time and ask you all the information about the lakes and the fish and everything. That's a form of service, and I enjoy, being out, being in contact with the people and helping them. And that's about it. That's me. So still up and going. Plan to stay as long as I can.